Hi, I'm Dave Hilwitz. So welcome to another one of these songwriting videos where I give you a bunch of advice about how to write songs, advice that's obviously really intended for myself. Okay, in the last video I talked a lot about how I come up with ideas. Essentially, I don't do a lot of songwriting with my instrument, with my guitar. I do a little bit of songwriting with my guitar, and then I go out for a walk or I do something else, and ideas come to me and I record them on my phone. But you'll find if you adopt this approach that you will pretty soon be inundated with files. Before you know it, you'll just have like folder after folder after folder of different ideas. And if you don't have some kind of method for how to organize them, you'll make yourself miserable really quickly. I alluded in the first video to my organizational system. I think I may have built it up too much. Essentially, it's just a spreadsheet, which you'll see, which brings me to my first tip. Tip 1, number your ideas. So when I first got started, I thought that the best way to name song parts was based on dummy lyrics. So I would, write a little piece of a song. Maybe it would have like a lyric like back when I lived in Chicago. And then I would name the file back when, because little bits of text are a really good way of remembering things. And, 2 weeks later, I'd look at the file and say back when, and I'd be like, right, that's the back when I was in Chicago song. I know exactly what that is. The problem with this method, as you can imagine, is that time passes. And, 2 weeks later, you'll definitely still know what back when meant. But like a month later, you might not. A year later, like I have ideas on my computer that are from 2004. And yeah, they're labeled like that. And I have no idea what's inside the file. And often, even worse, I haven't made WAV files. They're just like some like, Cubase 2.0 file or something like that. And then, there's no chance that I'm even going to try to open it because why would I, right? But yeah, I'm still saving them. After doing that for a while and realizing that like little snippets of text weren't doing it for me, I moved on to using dates. And it was like year, month, day, so that like basically if you sorted the files alphabetically, it would sort chronologically as well. And that was pretty good for a while. The only thing that would happen is that I would get super depressed when I looked at it because, once again, I have ideas on my hard drive that go back to 2004. So after I worked with these dates for a while and, was getting increasingly depressed about these old song ideas that were just languishing on my hard drive, I remembered that Mozart actually had like a numbering system. It actually wasn't Mozart who came up with it, it was this guy Koelschel. Basically, Mozart wrote so much stuff that posthumously, Koelschel took it upon himself to number everything that he'd written. And yeah, it's just a numeric number starting at 1, the Koelschel number. And you'll see this next to Mozart pieces very often, like K345, K362. It's just a way of knowing which piece is being referred to. So yeah, after a while, I decided I would do the same thing. I would number my song ideas starting at 1. If you do this and number your songs like just numerically, you want to make sure that you use leading zeros. Like the first one should be 0001, not just 1, because otherwise they won't sort alphabetically. And you'll find pretty quickly that you want things to sort alphabetically. So yeah, that's my first tip. Okay, having said that, let's go over to the computer and take a look at how I organize my song ideas. Okay, so before we get into the spreadsheet, here is my song pieces directory. This is actually a pretty old backup of it because I'm using an alternate computer. But essentially, this is it. It's just a bunch of MP3s and WAV files and AIF files. Each one corresponds to a little acoustic demo, or sometimes it's even just something that I recorded on my phone, with a number, as we discussed, and a little bit of text, some lyrics or something to jog my memory. You'll notice that before the numbers, though, there are letters, B, C, V. These letters correspond to song parts. So B is bridge, C is chorus, V is verse, which brings me to my next tip. Tip 2, know the formula. In other words, know the kind of music you're writing. If you're writing pop songs or rock songs, chances are you're going to be writing verses and choruses and bridges. Almost every kind of music has some conventions. Usually when somebody calls something formulaic, it's a way of putting down music as being like made in a kind of like automated, artless way. At the same time, there are conventions, and especially when it comes to rock music and pop music, almost every rock song has a verse and a chorus. And even if you don't plan to stick to that, it's still useful to have those categories in your head, because then you can kind of sort your stuff into these like nice little buckets. Speaking of which, here is a blank version of the template, which I will of course share in the description of this video. And because I know I'm writing these different kinds of song parts, I've separated it out into verses, choruses, bridges. Here's a version of it that is a little more lived in. Essentially, it's as simple as can be. It's basically like one row per song piece. yeah, the names correspond exactly to the names that are in the song pieces directory. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what our end goal is for this spreadsheet. Ultimately, we've got all these song pieces. Obviously, we want to assemble them into songs. In order to do that, it's important to know some information about the song pieces. What key are they in? What keys could they work in potentially? What their tempo is. That's what most of this metadata is. It's like little bits of information about the song pieces that will allow us to not try every possible combination. When you're trying to find a verse and a chorus that go together, it can be very, very frustrating if you don't know any information going in. So after you record something, just spending a little bit of time cataloging it will actually save you a lot of effort later on. The goal with this, in part, is to just have like a trusted system. Like, I know that all of my verses are in this spreadsheet, so I don't have to think like, oh, I've got this thing on my phone and, I should do something with that someday. If I recorded it, it's here. Yeah, let's go through the columns. Which brings me to my next tip. Tip 3, know your limitations. In my case, my biggest limitation is actually my voice. It's not that I don't like my voice, it's that I have a voice that works really well in some registers and not so well in other registers. So it's very important for me to know what range a specific idea is going to sound best in. That's what the perfect key is. And you'll see here, right next to the perfect key is like a key range. Generally, my voice sounds best when I'm right at the top of my range, not over my range, but just like there's an F sharp that I can hit that is like the highest note I can comfortably hit. And if I pick a perfect key, I know that there's no note that's higher than that F sharp. But yeah, whatever your limitations are, if you're writing vocal melodies, you obviously need to know your range. If you're writing melodies for violin, obviously you need to know the range of a violin, that sort of thing. Key range. Key range is basically the same thing. Usually the piece of information that's being added there is how low can it go without sounding stupid. I can sing pretty low, but it doesn't sound nearly as good. So for example, for the first one, I know that G minor is as low as I can go without it sounding dumb. Same thing for tempo. Perfect tempo is almost always the tempo that I record the demo in. Songs can usually go a little bit faster or a little bit slower, like, there's usually a 10 or 15 BPM range. If you slow down a fast song a ton, it usually sounds terrible, and vice versa. Finally, rating. Now, obviously, this is completely subjective. I generally try to wait like a week or two before I rate it. It's funny with these things, like when I've just finished writing something, I always think it sounds pretty good. The day after, I always think it sounds awful. A month later, I start to get a little bit more objective. Like I feel like my taste levels out. It's definitely useful to come back in periodically and listen to the demos and just re-rate things. My opinions change drastically over time. So yeah. Okay, and the final field is notes, and that's basically just like an anything goes text field. Like down here, for example, I wrote "this sucks." Down here, I wrote "super Beatlesy," which could go either way depending on the kind of song I'm working on. Sometimes it's helpful to have like little hints. I think of that movie Memento where the guy's leaving himself notes because he has amnesia or whatever. This is a little bit like that. All of this stuff, like I don't remember any of these things. It's an alternate version of myself who wrote all of this stuff. Finally, there's a date recorded field, which as you can see, I'm making very good use of. I haven't filled that in once. But yeah, that's pretty much the whole spreadsheet. I hope this was helpful. I'm going to post a link to the spreadsheet below. If you folks have similar spreadsheets or organizational systems or whatever, I'd be really interested in seeing them. Obviously, this is a system that's working for me, but it's also always a work in progress. I'd love to see how other people are working. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, make sure you hit like and subscribe. Yeah, see you next time.